This is Ira Lipson. Welcome to Ocean Liners on Print. So let's dive into why the United States Lines missed out on the financial opportunities of the roaring 1920s. It's the roaring 1920s. It's the age of Prohibition. It's the time when many Americans want to drink alcohol. It's a time when many Americans want to travel to Europe. When you think about it, Americans have two choices when traveling to Europe: either travel on a dry, alcohol free, prohibition compliant American ship, or a foreign flagged ship that serves alcohol. What would many Americans choose? I need not say more. Prohibition compliance hurt the United States Lines financials. This was strike number one. Strike number two was the lack of a proper running mate for the Leviathan, which hurt the United States Lines. A beautiful postcard depiction of the Leviathan. Of the three fleets that acquired the three superliners of the Hamburg America line, the Cunard line, which acquired the Imperator and renamed it the Berengaria, the White Star line, which acquired the Bismarck, renaming it the Majestic, and the United States Lines, which acquired the Vaterland, as pictured in this beautiful postcard, to be renamed the Leviathan. The United States Lines was in an awkward position. Remember the issue of the United States Lines lacking a proper running mate for the Leviathan. Here is how this impaired the competitive position of the United States Lines versus Cunard and White Star. The Leviathan, rated by the United States Lines at 59,000 tons, was brought into the United States Lines, a fleet whose next largest ship was under 24,000 tons, the George Washington, and the America at 21,000 tons. These ships were rated at respective speeds of 26 knots, 20 knots, and 18 knots. Actually, the Leviathan supposedly hit 28 knots during a speed trial. The Berengaria had two better matched running mates within the Cunard line. The Berengaria, at 52,000 tons and 24 knots, served alongside the Aquitania of 46,000 tons and 24 knots, and the smaller but fastest ship at the time of its construction at 31,500 tons and 26 knots, the Mauretania. The Majestic, at 56,000 tons, had a good running mate within the White Star line in the form of the sister ship of the ill-fated Titanic, the Olympic, at 46,000 tons. Each ship, respectively, could achieve 24 and 21 knots. So, the Leviathan was more than double the size and 40% faster than its largest running mate. This put the United States Lines at a marketing and scheduling disadvantage compared to Cunard and White Star lines. Strike three was the higher labor costs for US-based versus European-based ships. These three strikes resulted in poor financial performance for the United States Lines, resulting in the line being sold twice in 1929 and 1931. To make matters worse, the United States Lines received two new builds: the Manhattan of 1932 and the Washington of 1933. The timing of the delivery of these two ships couldn't have been at a worse time, as was during the height of the Great Depression. Unfortunately, these two beautiful ships saw passenger service for only a few more years just like the rest of the United States Lines fleet that survived the Depression, as they were requisitioned by the U.S. military for World War II, only never to see passenger service again. The exception was the America of 1940, which the United States of 1952 will be discussed in another video. How would you rank these three strikes in order of importance to hurting the United States Lines financials in the 1920s? Do you think there were other factors contributing to the situation? Please place your thoughts in the comment box below. Now, let's get to ocean liners on print. Let's examine highlights of these two United States Lines brochures from the 1920s. These will help you gain a flavor for the line and the 1920s style. Starting with the George Washington, a nearly 24,000-ton acquisition from the North German Lloyd, the caption below the picture capitalizes on post-war sentiment as it reads, quote, "No history of the World War would be complete without a reference to this famous ship which carried thousands of soldiers to France and after the armistice was used by the delegation of the United States in the peace conference." Here we have the anteroom of the social hall of the George Washington, which exudes opulence with the beautiful gold figures on dark stained panels. The 1920s models top off the ambiance of the room. The model on the right is holding something. If it were today, one would think she was looking at her cell phone, but it was probably a handheld mirror. In the next example, the second-class cabin social room shows subdued elegance, and a quote from below the picture reads, quote, "Here you will meet in a social way college men going abroad to study, journalists, businessmen, teachers, families, artists," close quote. United States Lines here was capitalizing on the American trend to travel overseas during the Roaring '20s. This is a look at the formality of the first cabin dining room of the George Washington. This picture illustrates an atmosphere of formality and etiquette. The quote below is as follows, quote, "One day on deck, where the brisk salt air of the sea sweeps through the nostrils and permeates the whole being, even makes the chronic invalid forget his rules of diet." Close quote. How could this be printed in a promotional brochure? I find it hard to believe, even by the standards of 100 years ago, to have this in print. Here we have the dining room of the second cabin, which illustrates subdued elegance. The lounge in the George Washington is one room on the ship. If I had the chance, I would want to visit. I'm a big fan of black and white photography, and the effect of black and white photography combined with the piano, the curved ceiling, and the 1920s models contribute to a special ambiance that is not duplicatable. The smoking room on the George Washington is illustrated here. What strikes me here is the ceiling fan. The George Washington was built around 1907 to 1908. Ships of the time did not have air conditioning. In fact, it wasn't until the early 1930s that some new ships had air conditioning, but only in the dining room. Eventually, more ships had more public rooms air conditioned. And it wasn't until the 1950s that you started seeing passenger ships becoming completely air conditioned. And a quote from the bottom of the page reads, quote, "In this big wood-paneled smoking room with large windows looking out over the open sea, men on board will find an ideal lounging place. Here, men can relax, play cards, smoke, tell stories, talk, or read in peace. You will always find congenial fellowship here." The verbiage would be strange by today's standards, but I guess was acceptable in the 1920s. My burning question is, why do men have to read in peace? The smoking room in the second cabin on the George Washington has more interesting verbiage, and I quote, "This room has the tone of a high-class men's grill or cafe," close quote. I guess men needed their own place. Another quote, "Here the passengers gather every night to read the record of the ship's daily run, and it is always a thrilling moment, and pools are made for the next day." Close quote. The ship's daily run is the number of miles traveled by the ship in a 24-hour period of time. By discussing pools here, I guess United States Lines was promoting gambling. Yet, at the same time, due to Prohibition, the line did not serve alcohol. Another quote, "The smoking room is always like a great man's club, a place for yarns and good fellowship." Close quote. Does anyone know what a yarn is? I don't. If you want, put your comment below in the box as far as what you think a yarn is. Here's another off-the-chart claim, and I quote, about the second cabin barbershop on the George Washington. Quote, "Just an absolutely sanitary, germ-proof," close quote. How could something be germ-proof? The only explanation for having this quote is that this was the 1920s, and White Castle started then and claimed to be of the utmost in cleanliness. So maybe the United States Lines was trying to make a parallel with White Castle. That's just only my thought. The President Harding and President Roosevelt were new builds through the United States Shipping Board and were of the 535 class, as they were 535 feet long. Here is a scene of deck activities on the President Roosevelt, a far cry from outdoor pools, water slides, and rock climbing walls on today's ships. After all, the ship was built and launched in 1921. A direct quote from below the picture, quote, "Shuffleboard is fast giving way to the newer games of deck golf and tennis," closed quote. Here we have a suite deluxe on the Roosevelt, which shows elegance in the details. And what's interesting is that in these brochures, the United States Lines, when it comes to promoting the first cabin rooms, there always seems to be models, where usually when promoting the second cabin, when looking at the illustrations, there were no models. The next picture is of the main dining salon. The opulence you would think would only be found on a superliner, yet this is a president's ship of only 535 feet long. This is the writing room on a president's ship, whether it's the President Harding or President Roosevelt. Writing rooms were an important feature on most ships until maybe the 1970s, and kind of went out of style. This was a place to write correspondences such as letters and postcards. Passengers would then take their correspondences to the purser's office by postage, and the purser's office would mail them when in port. Just another example of the need to be connected without the benefit of iPhones and computers. The social hall on the President Harding is another example of elegance one would think would only be found on a superliner. The ceiling and wall ornamentation are nothing short of magnificent. The history of the United States Lines would be incomplete without mentioning the Leviathan. Some interesting facts of the Leviathan are its rehabilitation was directed and supervised by William Francis Gibbs, who designed many American ships, including the Liberty ships, the Victory ships, numerous ocean liners, and of course, the United States of 1952. Like most triple funnel ships, the rear funnel of the Leviathan was a dummy. During the time of its construction as the Vaterland, the important immigrant trade viewed ships with more funnels as being safer. In my opinion, many of the three-funnel ships are the best-looking passenger ships of all time. An exception to the rule about most triple-funnel ships having a dummy funnel is the Queen Mary, which had all three funnels as functional. Look at how the lifeboats are triple stacked. The abundance of lifeboats reflects the time when the ship was launched as the Vaterland in 1913. This is 1 year after the Titanic sank, and regulations required adequate number of lifeboats. Here we have the bedroom of a suite on the Leviathan. Just look at how the models are situated to not only show the elegance, but also the scale of spaciousness aboard. A typical stateroom with bath. At the time of the Vaterland being constructed, few cabins on ships had private bathrooms. The Leviathan, formerly Vaterland, was a leader at its time in terms of amenities. The corner of the social hall on the Leviathan, nothing short of opulence. The second cabin social hall on the Leviathan. We have understated elegance, and a quote from below the picture, quote, "This room is always the center of social activities, which are one of the most delightful phases of the voyage and seems to be especially attractive to the ladies." Close quote. I guess certain rooms on the United States lines were geared towards specific genders. The smoking room of the Leviathan shows such a level of detail of design, including a fireplace, and a direct quote from the bottom of the page, quote, "It is a favorite club-like retreat for the men, where one may enjoy a quiet smoke, a chat, a game of cards, in an atmosphere of ease and good fellowship," close quote. But of course, they can't accompany that smoke with an alcoholic drink because of Prohibition. The second-class dining room of the Leviathan is unremarkable, unlike the quote at the bottom of the page. Quote, "The modern magic of refrigeration makes it possible to provide everything from meat to eggs, milk to vegetables, as fresh as on the farm." Close quote. We may not be able to appreciate refrigeration to earn bragging rights, but at the time of the launch of the ship as Vaterland, many ships did not have refrigeration. These ships carried livestock which would be slaughtered as the need arose to fulfill menu selections, milk or yielding eggs. Here is the America of 1905 as an acquisition of the Hamburg America line. The elegant dining saloon aboard the America. The smoking room on the America, complete with fireplace. The direct quote from the bottom of the page, quote, "Anyone who looks in at the door of the smoking room on board the America beholds a scene of masculine ease and enjoyment. It is in surroundings such as these that men love to relax during the voyage in the company of a well-tried pipe or a fragrant cigar." Close quote. Once again, separation of the sexes. Also, wouldn't these smokers want to accompany their tobacco with an alcoholic drink? Not when the United States lines is compliant with Prohibition. The Republic was previously with the Hamburg America line and built in 1907. The fittings of an early 1900s cabin as depicted on the Republic: a wash sink, berths, exposed piping, and exposed deck plating as the ceiling. And this was standard for the time. A quote from this page describing the Republic's smoking room, quote, "Perhaps the most important room to men passengers is the smoking room," close quote. This seems to be a recurring theme regarding smoking rooms. Here is a menu from an August 1931 voyage on the President Roosevelt. This is the actual menu. The cover from a passenger list from the same voyage. Here is a page from the passenger list from the same voyage with the names of the captain and high-level officers. And now some examples of artwork in advertisements for the United States lines from the 1930s. Here we have the promotion for the maiden voyage of the Manhattan, the greatest liner ever built in America. Here, the United States Lines boasts the features of this new ship. Every class cabin has a bath or shower and toilet. Most cabins on ships lacked private facilities in the early 1930s. Every room has beds, not berths. Most ships up until the early 1930s had cabins with narrow berths that are barely the width of one's shoulders instead of beds. The Manhattan has a Pompeian pool. While numerous ships in 1932 had indoor swimming pools, many still did not have them. Not part of the ad, but the Manhattan carried the U.S. Olympic team to the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, including Jesse Owens. Look at the beautiful artwork showing a gangway leading to the Manhattan or Washington. Room for 10, but reserved for 2. What a great slogan to promote the spacious cabins aboard the Manhattan and the Washington. Look at the distance between two beds, establishing the scale for the roominess in the cabins. Dining salons were also air-conditioned. Most ships in 1932 and 1933, when the Manhattan and Washington were placed into service, did not have air conditioning. Some, but very few ships had any air conditioning, so the United States Lines earned bragging rights when it came to air conditioning. The two ships were among the earliest of ships to have any rooms that were air conditioned. The need for humans to be connected started long before the internet age, as evidenced by this ad for the Leviathan in the 1930s. The headline reads, "Wall Street stretches to Cherbourg." This is during the Depression. Travelers want to track and take action regarding their investments. In this example, the Leviathan is being promoted as a complete brokerage office, facilities for trading, continuous quotations by radio telephone, a telephone a few paces away for private consultation with your banker or broker at home. Another feature that is notable here is talkies. This ad was a few years since the advent of movies with sound. I hope you enjoyed the presentation at Ocean Liners on Print. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button below, as it helps the channel and helps to notify you of new episodes. Thank you so much. Just like these two cruise ships, I hope we can meet again real soon at Ocean Liners on Print.